When Thomas Carter accepted his new role as the SWAT team's commander, he never imagined that his own family would become the target of a misguided raid. It was supposed to be just another quiet morning for Thomas, his wife, and their kids. But then, chaos erupted as armed officers surrounded their home, shouting commands and breaking down their door. Thomas tried to reason with them, but the SWAT team wasn't listening. They had no idea that the man they were handcuffing was their soon-to-be leader. As the dust settled, the truth of Thomas's identity sent shockwaves through the entire squad. What they didn't realize was that this incident would be a turning point, not just for Thomas and his family, but for the entire police force. As the events of that day began to unfold, revealing deeper issues within the system, Thomas is determined to lead his team with integrity and make changes that would echo throughout the community. Before we dive into this gripping story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you're ready to join us on this intense journey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. The soft glow of dawn crept through the curtains of the Carter household, signaling the start of another day. In the kitchen, the sizzle of bacon and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air as Lisa Carter, a woman in her early 40s with a warm smile, bustled about preparing breakfast for her family. "Kids, breakfast in 5?" Lisa called out, her voice carrying up the stairs. Footsteps thundered down the hallway as 15-year-old Jasmine Carter emerged, her backpack slung over one shoulder. "Mom, have you seen my history textbook?" she asked, rifling through her bag. "Check the living room, honey. I think I saw it on the coffee table last night," Lisa replied, flipping a pancake with practiced ease. 10-year-old Marcus bounded down the stairs, nearly tripping over his untied shoelaces. "Mom, can I have extra syrup today? Please," he pleaded, his eyes wide with hope. Lisa chuckled, ruffling her son's hair. "Just a little extra, okay? Don't want you bouncing off the walls at school." As the kids settled at the table, Thomas Carter entered the kitchen, adjusting his tie. At 45, Thomas carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had seen his fair share of challenges and triumphs. His salt and pepper hair and the laugh lines around his eyes spoke of a life filled with both responsibility and joy. "Morning, kids," Thomas greeted, planting a kiss on Lisa's cheek before taking his seat at the head of the table. "Morning, Dad," the kids chorused, their mouths already full of pancakes. Lisa set a plate in front of Thomas, her hand lingering on his shoulder for a moment. "You're looking sharp today. Big day at work?" Thomas smiled, a hint of excitement in his eyes. "You could say that, but let's focus on you guys. What's on the agenda for today?" As the family chatted about their plans, Thomas's phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the caller ID and excused himself, stepping into the living room for privacy. "Carter here," he answered, his voice low. "Thomas, it's Captain Reynolds. Just wanted to touch base before the big announcement today. You ready to take the reins of our SWAT team?" Thomas's eyes flickered to the kitchen, ensuring his family couldn't overhear. "Yes, sir. I'm prepared and looking forward to the challenge." "Good, man. We'll make it official at the precinct meeting this afternoon. See you then." As Thomas ended the call, his gaze fell on the various mementos adorning the living room walls. A polished plaque from the police academy caught the morning light, its engraving a testament to his top-of-class performance. Next to it hung a framed photograph of a younger Thomas in military fatigues, his arm around a fellow soldier, both grinning despite the desert heat visible in the background. On the mantel, a glass display case housed his first police badge, its silver surface dulled with age, but no less meaningful. These tokens of his career in law enforcement were more than mere decorations. They were chapters of a life dedicated to serving and protecting. Thomas's reverie was interrupted by Lisa's voice. "Everything okay, hon?" He turned to find his wife standing in the doorway, concern etched on her face. Thomas smiled reassuringly. "Everything's fine. Just work stuff. Nothing to worry about." Lisa nodded, though her eyes held a hint of curiosity. She knew her husband well enough to sense when he was holding something back, but she also trusted him implicitly. "All right. Well, breakfast is getting cold, and the kids are about to head out." Thomas followed her back to the kitchen, where Jasmine was helping Marcus with his backpack. The scene before him filled Thomas with a sense of pride and purpose. These were the moments that reminded him why he did what he did, why he put on the uniform every day. "All right, troops," Thomas said, clapping his hands together. "Before you head out, let's have our daily Carter family huddle." The kids groaned good-naturedly, but gathered around their father, joined by Lisa. It was a tradition Thomas had started years ago, a moment to connect before they all went their separate ways for the day. "Jasmine," Thomas began, looking at his daughter, "you've got that big history test today, right?" Jasmine nodded, a flicker of nervousness crossing her face. "Yeah, on the Civil War. I've been studying all week, but I'm still worried." Thomas placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You've put in the work, and that's what matters. Remember, it's not just about memorizing dates and names. Try to understand the bigger picture, the causes and effects. You've got this, sweetie." Jasmine's posture straightened, bolstered by her father's confidence in her. "Thanks, Dad. I'll do my best." Thomas turned to Marcus, who was fidgeting with the straps of his backpack. "And you, young man, didn't you tell me you have a presentation in science class today?" Marcus's eyes widened. "Oh, yeah, I almost forgot. It's about the solar system." "Ah, the wonders of space," Thomas said with a grin. "Just remember to speak clearly and make eye contact with your classmates. And if you get nervous, just imagine them all in their pajamas." Marcus giggled at the mental image, his earlier anxiety melting away. "Okay, Dad, I'll try that." Thomas's expression turned more serious as he addressed both children. "And remember, no matter what happens today, good or bad, always be respectful to your teachers and classmates. Treat others the way you want to be treated. Can you do that for me?" "Yes, Dad," the kids replied in unison. Lisa watched the interaction with a mix of love and admiration. Thomas had always been a natural leader, whether at work or at home. His ability to inspire confidence and instill values in their children never ceased to amaze her. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the SWAT team's headquarters, casting a harsh glow over the tense faces of the officers gathered around a large tactical map. Sergeant Mike Donovan, a seasoned veteran with a no-nonsense attitude, stood at the head of the table, his piercing blue eyes scanning the room. "Listen up, people," Donovan barked, his voice cutting through the low murmur of conversation. "We've got a situation developing in the Oakwood neighborhood. Intel just came in about a high-level drug operation run out of a residential address." Officer Sarah Chun, the team's newest member, raised her hand. "Sergeant, do we have confirmation on this? It seems unusual for a major operation to be run out of a suburban area." Donovan's jaw tightened. "Chun, we don't have time for questions. This comes straight from narcotics. They've been tracking this guy for months, and he's slippery. Goes by the name Ghost. Apparently, he's been using the quiet neighborhood as a cover for his activities." He pointed to a spot on the map. "The address is 1542 Maple Street. Intelligence suggests the suspect is armed and dangerous, with possible connections to international cartels. We need to move fast before he catches wind of our operation and disappears again." The team exchanged glances, the gravity of the situation sinking in. Officer Jake Martinez, a burly man with a shaved head, leaned forward. "What's the plan, Sarge? Are we coordinating with local units?" Donovan shook his head. "Negative. We're keeping this operation tight. The fewer people involved, the less chance of a leak. We go in hard and fast, secure the suspect and any evidence before he can destroy it." A ripple of unease passed through the group. This wasn't their usual protocol, and the lack of coordination with other units was unusual. But Donovan's reputation preceded him. He was known for his instincts and his results. "Sir," Chen spoke up again, her brow furrowed. "Shouldn't we at least verify the intel? If there's a mistake..." Donovan cut her off with a sharp gesture. "Chen, I appreciate your caution, but we don't have that luxury. Every minute we waste is another minute this scumbag could be moving product or worse. We have a responsibility to act on this information immediately." He swept his gaze across the room, his voice dropping to a low, intense tone. "I know this isn't standard procedure, but sometimes we have to trust our gut. This ghost character has been wreaking havoc on our streets for too long. Today we in it. Any other questions?" The silence that followed was heavy with tension. Donovan nodded, satisfied. "Good. Gear up. We move out in 5, As the team dispersed to prepare, Chen lingered for a moment, her unease evident. Martinez noticed and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Hey, rookie, don't sweat it. Donovan knows what he's doing. This is why we train, for moments like this." Chen nodded, trying to shake off her doubts. "You're right. Let's do this." The gear-up room was a flurry of activity as the SWAT team prepared for the raid. The metallic clicks of weapons being checked and loaded punctuated the tense atmosphere. Officer Ryan O'Neill, a lanky redhead with a penchant for explosives, carefully packed his bag with breaching charges. "Hey, Martinez," O'Neill called out. "You think we'll need the big toys for this one?" Martinez grunted as he strapped on his bulletproof vest. "Better to have M and not need M, brother. This ghost character sounds like he might have some nasty surprises waiting for us." Across the room, Chen was methodically checking her gear, her movements precise but tinged with nervous energy. Noticing her demeanor, Officer Layla Corey, the team's sharpshooter, approached her. "First big raid, huh?" Corey asked, her voice gentle despite her intimidating appearance. Chen nodded, double-checking the straps on her helmet. "Is it that obvious?" Corey smiled. "We've all been there. Just remember your training. Stay focused, watch your teammates' backs, and trust your instincts. You've got this." As the team finished gearing up, Donovan entered the room, already fully equipped. His presence seemed to fill the space, and all eyes turned to him. "All right, people, this is it. Our target is dangerous and unpredictable. We going hard, we going fast. Secure the suspect, secure any evidence, and above all, watch each other's backs. Clear?" A chorus of "Clear, Sarge," echoed through the room. Donovan nodded grimly. "Move out." The team filed out of the headquarters, their boots thudding heavily on the concrete. The early morning sun glinted off their helmets as they climbed into the armored SWAT van. The engine roared to life, and they pulled out of the parking lot, siren silent but lights flashing. Inside the van, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. Martinez and O'Neill ran through their breach plan one last time, while Corey checked her rifle, her eyes focused and intense. Chun sat quietly, her hand resting on her sidearm, trying to calm her racing heart. As they neared the target location, Donovan's voice crackled over their comms. 2-minute warning. Remember, this suspect is known for his evasion tactics. He could have lookouts, so stay sharp. We need to move fast to prevent any evidence from being destroyed. The van screeched to a halt in front of 1542 Maple Street, the tires leaving black marks on the peaceful suburban road. In a choreographed move, the team spilled out of the vehicle, weapons at the ready. "Go, go, go!" Donovan shouted, and the team fanned out across the property with practiced precision. Inside the house, the Carter family's peaceful morning was shattered by the sudden commotion outside. Thomas froze in the middle of the living room. "What the hell?" he muttered, moving cautiously towards the window. Lisa emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Thomas? What's going on?" "I don't know," he replied, his gaze fixed on the window. "But I need you to trust me. Take Jasmine and Marcus, go to the back room, and stay there until I come for you. Understand?" Lisa nodded, her lips trembling as she fought back tears. She rushed to gather the children, who had frozen in place, confusion and fear etched on their young faces. "Mom?" Jasmine's voice quavered. "What's going on?" "It's okay, sweetie," Lisa said, trying to keep her voice calm. "We need to go to the back room. Your father will handle this." Marcus, his eyes wide with terror, clung to his mother's side. "Are the bad guys here?" "No, honey," Lisa assured him, though doubt crept into her voice. "There's just been a misunderstanding. Come on, let's go." As Lisa ushered the children towards the back of the house, Thomas took a deep breath, steeling himself for what he needed to do. He could hear the SWAT team shouting commands outside, their voices harsh and demanding. "I'm coming out," Thomas called loudly, his hands raised above his head. "I'm unarmed. This is a mistake." He moved slowly towards the front door, his heart pounding in his chest. As he reached for the doorknob, he could hear Lisa's muffled sobs from the back room, mingling with Marcus's frightened whimpers. The sound tore at his heart, but he knew he had to stay focused. Thomas opened the door, squinting against the bright morning sun. The scene that greeted him was surreal. His peaceful suburban lawn transformed into a war zone, with heavily armed SWAT officers positioned around the property, their weapons trained on him. "My name is Thomas Carter," he said, his voice clear and steady. "I live here with my family. There's been a terrible mistake." For a moment, silence fell over the scene. Thomas could see the confusion in some of the officers' eyes, but their weapons remained pointed at him. Sergeant Donovan stepped forward, his face a mask of suspicion. "Sir, we have information that this residence is being used for illegal activities. I'm going to need you to get down on the ground now." Thomas's mind raced. He knew that complying was the safest option, but he also knew that every second this continued put his family at greater risk. He had to find a way to de-escalate the situation. "Officer," Thomas said, addressing Donovan directly, "I understand you're doing your job, but I assure you, there are no illegal activities happening here. I'm a police officer myself. If you'll allow me to reach for my badge." "Don't move," Donovan barked, his finger tightening on the trigger. "Get on the ground now, or we will use force." The tension in the air was palpable. Thomas could feel the weight of multiple weapons trained on him, could see the confusion and fear in the eyes of the younger officers. He knew that one wrong move could end in tragedy. Slowly, deliberately, Thomas began to lower himself to his knees, his hands still raised. "I'm complying," he said calmly. "But please, my family is inside. They're frightened. Let me explain." His words were cut short as two officers rushed forward, roughly pushing Thomas face down onto the porch. The cold metal of handcuffs bit into his wrists as they secured him. "House is not secure," one of the officers called out. "We need to clear the interior." Thomas's heart raced as he heard the team preparing to enter his home. "Wait," he shouted, struggling against the restraints. "My wife and children are inside. They're innocent. Please, just listen to me." Inside the house, Lisa huddled with Jasmine and Marcus in the back bedroom, her arms wrapped protectively around her children. The sounds of shouting and heavy footsteps filled the air, growing closer with each passing second. "Mom," Jasmine whispered, her voice trembling. "What's happening? Why are the police here?" Lisa shook her head, trying to keep her own fear from showing. "I don't know, sweetie, but your father will sort this out. We just need to stay calm and do what the officers say, okay?" Marcus buried his face in his mother's side, tears streaming down his cheeks. "I'm scared, Mom," he whimpered. "I know, baby," Lisa soothed, running her hand through his hair. "It's okay to be scared, but we're going to be brave, just like Dad taught us. Remember?" The door to the bedroom burst open, and a female officer entered, her weapon raised. "Police! Hands where I can see them." Lisa instinctively tightened her hold on her children, raising one hand. "Please," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "We're not armed. These are my children. We don't understand what's happening." The officer's eyes widened as she took in the scene before her. Not the hardened criminal she had expected, but a terrified family huddled together. For a moment, her resolve wavered. "Ma'am," the officer said, lowering her weapon slightly, "I need you and your children to come with me. Slowly. Keep your hands where I can see them." Lisa nodded, her heart pounding. "Okay, kids," she said softly. "We're going to go with the officer. Everything will be all right. Just stay close to me." As they stood, Jasmine let out a choked sob. The reality of the situation was finally sinking in, and the teenager's composure crumbled. "Mom, I'm scared," she cried. "Where's Dad? What are they going to do to us?" Lisa wrapped an arm around Jasmine's shoulders, guiding her towards the door. "Your father is handling this, sweetie. We just need to stay calm and do as we're told. It'll all be over soon." The officer led them through the house, and Lisa's heart sank as she saw the destruction left in the wake of the SWAT team's search. Picture frames lay shattered on the floor, drawers had been emptied, and furniture overturned. Their peaceful home had been transformed into a chaotic mess in a matter of minutes. As they reached the living room, Lisa caught sight of Thomas through the window. He was face down on the porch, handcuffed and surrounded by officers. The sight of her strong, capable husband in such a vulnerable position sent a jolt of fear and anger through her. "Thomas!" she cried out, instinctively moving towards the door. The officer blocking her path. "Ma'am, I need you to stay back. For your own safety." Lisa's fear began to give way to indignation. "Safety? You're the ones who've broken into our home and terrorized my family. My husband is a police officer. There's been a terrible mistake." The officer's expression remained impassive. "Ma'am, we're following protocol. Please remain calm and cooperate. We'll sort this out." Outside, Thomas could hear Lisa's voice, filled with a mixture of fear and anger. He struggled against his restraints, desperate to comfort his family and put an end to this nightmare. "Officer," he said, addressing the man standing guard over him. "Please, you have to listen to me. I'm Thomas Carter, soon to be the new SWAT commander for this precinct. If you'll just check with headquarters." "Quiet," the officer snapped, though Thomas could hear a note of uncertainty in his voice. "Sergeant Donovan will sort this out." Inside the house, the SWAT team continued their search, tearing through the family's belongings with ruthless efficiency. Lisa watched in horror as an officer rifled through her jewelry box, dumping its contents onto the bed. "Stop it," she cried out. "Those are family heirlooms. You have no right." The officer ignored her, continuing his search. Lisa felt a surge of helplessness and anger wash over her. She turned to the female officer who had first found them, desperation in her eyes. "Please," Lisa pleaded. "Can't you see this is a mistake? We're a normal family. My husband is a police officer. Our children are terrified. There has to be something you can do." The officer's expression softened slightly, but she shook her head. "I'm sorry, ma'am. We have to follow procedure. If there's been a mistake, it will be sorted out soon." Jasmine, who had been watching the scene unfold with wide eyes, suddenly spoke up. "This isn't right," she said, her voice shaking with a mixture of fear and anger. "You can't just break into people's homes and treat them like criminals without any proof. We have rights." The officer turned to Jasmine, surprise evident on her face. "Young lady, I understand you're upset, but—" "No, you don't understand," Jasmine interrupted, tears streaming down her face. "You're supposed to protect people, not terrorize them. My dad is one of you. He's a good person. We're good people. Why are you doing this to us?" Lisa wrapped her arm around Jasmine, both proud of her daughter's bravery and worried about the consequences of speaking out. "Honey, it's okay. Let's just stay calm and let them do their job. The truth will come out." Marcus, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly tugged on Lisa's shirt. "Mom," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I need to go to the bathroom." Lisa looked at the female officer pleadingly. "Please, my son needs to use the restroom. Can I take him?" The officer hesitated for a moment before nodding. "All right, but I'll have to accompany you." As they made their way to the bathroom, Lisa couldn't help but feel a surge of humiliation. Even this most basic privacy had been stripped from them. She helped Marcus into the bathroom, acutely aware of the officer's presence just outside the door. "It's okay, sweetie," Lisa said softly as Marcus sniffled. "Just do what you need to do. We'll be out of here soon." While they were in the bathroom, Sergeant Donovan entered the house, his face a mask of frustration. He approached Jasmine, who stood defiantly in the living room. "Young lady," Donovan said, his voice gruff, "I need you to tell me where your parents hide their illegal substances. Cooperate, and this will go easier for everyone." Jasmine's eyes widened in disbelief. "Illegal substances? Are you kidding me? We don't have anything like that. My parents don't even drink alcohol." "This is insane." Donovan's eyes narrowed. "Watch your tone, miss. Lying to a police officer is a serious offense." "I'm not lying," Jasmine shouted, her fear giving way to righteous anger. "You're the ones who are wrong. My dad is a police officer. If you just listen to him or check with your headquarters, you'd know that." Donovan's expression flickered for a moment, doubt creeping into his eyes. But he quickly masked it, turning to one of his officers. "Continue the search. Leave no stone unturned." As Lisa and Marcus emerged from the bathroom, they found the house in even greater disarray. Officers were pulling books from shelves, appending furniture, and tearing through closets. "Stop it!" Lisa cried out, unable to contain her anguish any longer. "You're destroying our home. There's nothing to find because we've done nothing wrong. Donovan turned to her, his voice cold. Ma'am, if you and your family have nothing to hide, then you have nothing to fear. Let us do our job. Lisa felt a surge of anger unlike anything she'd ever experienced. Your job? Your job is to protect and serve, not to terrorize innocent families. My husband has dedicated his life to law enforcement, and this is how you repay him? By treating us like criminals in our own home? As the chaos of the raid continued to unfold, Thomas Carter remained face down on his front porch, hands cuffed behind his back. Despite the undignified position, his mind raced, formulating a plan to regain control of the situation. Years of training and experience had taught him that in moments of crisis, a calm and authoritative presence could make all the difference. Taking a deep breath, Thomas raised his voice, infusing it with the commanding tone he'd honed over years of leadership. Officers, he called out, his words crisp and clear, I am ordering you to cease this operation immediately and contact your headquarters for verification of my identity. The sudden shift in Thomas's demeanor caught the attention of several SWAT team members. They exchanged uncertain glances, thrown off by the authoritative voice coming from their supposed suspect. Thomas continued, his voice unwavering. I am Thomas Carter, soon to be your new SWAT commander. This raid is not only a mistake, but a gross violation of protocol. Contact Captain Richards immediately and have him confirm my identity. Sergeant Donovan, who had been overseeing the search inside the house, emerged onto the porch. His face was a mask of confusion and growing doubt. Sir, he said, addressing Thomas, we have orders. Your orders, Thomas interrupted, are based on faulty intelligence. As a commanding officer, I'm instructing you to verify the information before this situation escalates further. Make the call, Sergeant. Donovan hesitated, torn between following his original orders and responding to the unmistakable authority in Thomas's voice. As he wavered, a young officer named Rodriguez stepped forward, his face pale. Sarge, Rodriguez said quietly, I think he might be telling the truth. Donovan turned to the younger officer, his eyebrows raised. What makes you say that, Rodriguez? Rodriguez swallowed hard, clearly uncomfortable being the center of attention. Well, sir, there was that internal memo last week about the new SWAT commander. I remember seeing a photo, and this guy, he looks just like him. A ripple of unease passed through the assembled officers. Doubt began to creep into their expressions as they looked between Thomas, still handcuffed on the ground, and their increasingly uncertain sergeant. Thomas seized the moment of hesitation. Sergeant Donovan, he said, his voice level but intense, you're facing a critical decision right now. Every second you delay in verifying my identity compounds the error your team has already made. Make the call. Donovan's resolve finally crumbled under the weight of Thomas's words and his own growing uncertainty. He pulled out his phone, his fingers trembling slightly as he dialed. This is Sergeant Donovan, he said when the call connected. I need to speak with Captain Richards immediately. It's urgent. As Donovan waited to be connected, intense silence fell over the scene. The other officers shifted uncomfortably, the gravity of their potential mistake beginning to sink in. Inside the house, Lisa Carter pressed her ear to the door, straining to hear what was happening outside. The children huddled close to her, their eyes wide with fear and confusion. What's going on, Mom? Jasmine whispered. Lisa squeezed her daughter's hand. I think they're finally listening to your father. After what seemed like an eternity, Captain Richards' voice came through the phone. Donovan? What's this about? We're in the middle of a briefing here. Donovan took a deep breath. Captain, we're at 1542 Maple Street, conducting the raid on the suspected drug operation. But, sir, there's been a complication. Complication? What kind of complication, Sergeant? The homeowner claims to be Thomas Carter, sir. Says he's the new SWAT commander. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Captain Richards spoke again, his voice was low and dangerous. Sergeant Donovan, are you telling me that you've raided the home of our incoming SWAT commanders? Donovan's face drained of color. Sir, we had intelligence that... Intelligence? Richards exploded. What kind of half-baked intelligence leads you to raid a fellow officer's home without so much as a courtesy call to verify. Do you have any idea what you've done? As Donovan struggled to respond, Thomas called out from his position on the ground. Captain Richards? This is Thomas Carter. I'd appreciate it if you could come down here and sort this mess out. Preferably before my neighbors call the media. There was another pause, followed by a string of muffled curses from the captain. I'll be there in 10 minutes, he growled before hanging up. The next few minutes passed in tense silence. Donovan paced back and forth, running his hands through his hair in agitation. The other officers stood awkwardly, avoiding eye contact with Thomas or each other. Thomas remained calm, his mind already racing ahead to how he would handle this situation once he was released. He knew that his response in the coming hours would set the tone for his entire tenure as SWAT commander. Exactly 9 minutes after the call ended, a police cruiser came tearing down the street, lights flashing. It screeched to a halt in front of the Carter home, and Captain Richards emerged, his face a thundercloud of anger and dismay. As he took in the scene, the SWAT van, the officers in full tactical gear, and Thomas Carter handcuffed on his own front porch, the captain's expression cycled through disbelief, shock, and finally, a grim determination. Get those cuffs off him. Now, Richards barked. 2 officers rushed to comply, helping Thomas to his feet as they removed the handcuffs. Thomas rotated his shoulders, working out the stiffness from his ordeal. Captain Richards approached, his face ashen. Thomas, I don't even know where to begin. This is a catastrophic failure of intelligence and protocols. Thomas finished for him, his voice calm but steely. Yes, it is, John, and we're going to get to the bottom of it. But first, my family has been traumatized, and I need to see to them. Richards nodded, stepping aside as Thomas strode into his home. The scene that greeted him made his heart clench. Furniture was overturned, drawers emptied onto the floor, and in the midst of the chaos stood Lisa and the children, their faces a mixture of relief and lingering fear. Dad! Marcus cried, breaking free from Lisa's embrace and running to Thomas. Thomas scooped him up, holding him close as Jasmine and Lisa joined them. For a long moment, the family clung to each other, the tension of the morning finally beginning to dissipate. Outside, Captain Richards turned to the assembled SWAT team, his voice low and furious. I don't know how this happened, and frankly, I don't care about your excuses right now. What I care about is that you've just committed one of the most egregious violations of protocol and basic human decency that I've seen in my entire career. The officers stood at attention, their faces a mixture of shame and apprehension. Sergeant Donovan stepped forward, his voice shaky. Sir, I take full responsibility for. You're damn right you do. Richards cut him off. But let's be clear. This is a failure at every level. Each and every one of you had the opportunity to question this operation, to verify the intelligence, to show basic human decency to a family who's done nothing wrong. And you failed. All of you. As Richards continued to dress down the SWAT team, Thomas emerged from the house, his arm around Lisa's shoulders. The captain immediately turned to them, his anger giving way to profound regret. Thomas, Lisa, he said, his voice heavy with emotion. I cannot begin to express how sorry I am for what you and your children have endured this morning. This should never have happened, and I promise you, there will be a full investigation. Thomas nodded, his face stern. I appreciate that, John. But right now, what my family needs is for these officers to leave our property. We have a lot of cleaning up to do, both literally and figuratively. Captain Richards turned to the SWAT team. You heard the man. Pack up and clear out. Report to the station immediately for debriefing. And trust me when I say, this is far from over. As the officers began to disperse, the young officer Rodriguez hesitantly approached Thomas. Sir, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, I knew something wasn't right. I recognized you from the memo, but I didn't speak up. I'm so sorry. Thomas studied the young man's face, seeing the genuine remorse in his eyes. What's your name, officer? Rodriguez, sir. Michael Rodriguez. Thomas nodded. Well, Officer Rodriguez, recognizing a mistake is the first step in correcting it. Remember this feeling and let it guide you to do better in the future. As the last of the SWAT team departed, Leaving behind a neighborhood buzzing with curiosity and concern, Thomas turned to Captain Richards. "John, I'm going to need everything you have on how this operation was greenlit. Every piece of intelligence, every authorization, every decision point. This can never happen again. Not to my family, not to any family." Richards nodded solemnly. "You'll have it all, Thomas. And for what it's worth, I'm glad it's you taking over the SWAT command. After this, we need someone who understands firsthand the consequences of our actions." As the captain prepared to leave, Thomas called out to him. "Oh, and John, tell the PR department to prepare a statement. We're going to get ahead of this before it explodes in the media." With a final nod, Richards departed, leaving the Carter family standing on their front porch, surveying the aftermath of the morning's chaos. Neighbors had begun to emerge from their homes, watching curiously from their lawns. Lisa squeezed Thomas's hand. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice tired but resolute. Thomas took a deep breath, looking at his wife and children. Despite the ordeal they'd just endured, he saw strength in their eyes, a resilience that made his heart swell with pride. "Now," he said, "we clean up, we heal, and we make sure this never happens to another family again. This isn't how I plan to start my new job, but maybe this is exactly what our department needs to see to understand the real impact of our actions." As the family turned to go back inside their home, Thomas knew that the road ahead would be challenging. But he was more committed than ever to his role as SWAT commander. He would use this experience to reshape the department, to instill a deeper sense of responsibility and humanity in every officer under his command. The morning's raid had been a disaster, but from this disaster, Thomas was determined to forge a new era of policing, one that truly lived up to the motto of protect and serve. As the Carter family stepped back into their home, the full extent of the damage became apparent. The once tidy living room was now a chaotic mess of overturned furniture, scattered papers, and broken picture frames. Lisa let out a small gasp, her hand covering her mouth as she took in the scene. Thomas placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "It's okay, honey. We'll put it all back together." Jasmine, her initial shock wearing off, began to seethe with anger. "This isn't fair. They can't just come in here, destroy our home, and then leave like nothing happened." Thomas turned to his daughter, his expression serious but gentle. "You're right, Jasmine. It isn't fair, but getting angry won't fix this. What we need to do now is channel that energy into making sure this doesn't happen to anyone else." Marcus, still clinging to his mother's side, looked up at Thomas with wide eyes. "Dad, are the bad guys going to come back?" Thomas knelt down to his son's level, placing his hands on the boy's shoulders. "No, Marcus. Those weren't bad guys. They were police officers who made a very big mistake. But I promise you, they won't be coming back." Lisa, ever practical, took a deep breath and squared her shoulders. "All right, everyone. We can't change what happened, but we can start putting our home back in order. Let's get to work." As the family began the arduous task of cleaning up, Thomas's phone buzzed incessantly. Messages from colleagues, superiors, and even a few reporters were flooding in, all demanding explanations and statements about the morning's events. "I need to make a few calls," Thomas said, his voice tight with controlled frustration. "I'll be in the study." Lisa nodded, understanding the weight of responsibility that now rested on her husband's shoulders. As Thomas retreated to the study, she turned to the children. "Okay, team. Jasmine, you start putting the books back on the shelves. Marcus, you can help me pick up the smaller items. We'll tackle this together." In the study, Thomas closed the door behind him and took a moment to collect his thoughts. The events of the morning played through his mind like a surreal nightmare. He had known that taking on the role of SWAT commander would come with challenges, but nothing could have prepared him for this. Taking a deep breath, he dialed the number for the police department's public relations officer, Sandra Reeves. "Thomas," Sandra answered on the first ring, her voice a mixture of concern and professional composure. "I've been briefed on the situation. How are you and your family holding up?" "We're shaken, but we'll be okay," Thomas replied, his voice steady. "Sandra, we need to get ahead of this story before it spirals out of control. I want to hold a press conference this afternoon." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Are you sure that's wise, Thomas?" Maybe we should wait until we have all the facts. The facts are that a SWAT team raided the home of an innocent family based on faulty intelligence, Thomas interrupted. And that family happened to be mine. We can't hide from this, Sandra. We need to face it head on, acknowledge the mistake, and outline exactly how we're going to make sure it never happens again. Sandra sighed, but Thomas could hear the sound of her fingers already tapping at a keyboard. All right, I'll set it up for 3 p.m. at headquarters. That should give us enough time to prepare a statement and alert the media. Thank you, Sandra. I'll see you then. As Thomas ended the call, there was a soft knock at the study door. Come in, he called out. Lisa entered, closing the door behind her. Her face was etched with concern. How bad is it? She asked quietly. Thomas ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. It's bad, Lisa. This isn't just about us. This incident has the potential to undermine public trust in the entire department. Lisa moved closer, taking her husband's hand in hers. But it also has the potential to be a catalyst for real change. Isn't that what you've always wanted? To make a difference in how policing is done? Thomas squeezed her hand, grateful for her unwavering support. You're right, but the road ahead isn't going to be easy. The press conference this afternoon is just the beginning. We'll face it together, Lisa assured him. As a family, back in the living room, Jasmine and Marcus had made significant progress in tidying up. Jasmine was carefully placing the last of the fallen books back on the shelf when she paused, holding a familiar leather-bound volume. Hey, Mom, she called out. Look what I found. Lisa came over, her eyes widening as she recognized the book. It was Thomas's Police Academy yearbook, a memento he kept as a reminder of where his journey in law enforcement had begun. I think Dad might want to see this, Lisa said softly. As if on cue, Thomas emerged from the study, his face set with determination. He paused when he saw the yearbook in Jasmine's hands. I'd almost forgotten about that, he said, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. He took the book from Jasmine, flipping through the pages until he came to a photo of his graduating class. Young faces stared back at him, full of hope and idealism. You know, Thomas said, addressing his family, when I graduated from the academy, I thought I knew everything there was to know about being a good police officer. But days like today remind me that we never stop learning, never stop striving to do better. He closed the book, his resolve strengthening. What happened to us this morning was a failure on multiple levels. But it's also an opportunity to reshape how we approach policing, how we gather and verify intelligence, and how we interact with the communities we're sworn to protect. Jasmine, her earlier anger giving way to curiosity, looked up at her father. How are you going to do that, Dad? Thomas smiled at his daughter's question. Well, for starters, we're going to be completely transparent about what happened here today. No cover-ups, no excuses. We'll acknowledge the mistake, apologize for it, and then lay out a concrete plan for change. He turned to Lisa. I'd like you and the kids to be at the press conference this afternoon. The public needs to see the human impact of what happened here today. Lisa nodded, though Thomas could see the flicker of apprehension in her eyes. Are you sure that's a good idea? Exposing the kids to all that media attention. Thomas knelt down, looking Marcus in the eye. What do you think, buddy? Do you feel up to helping Dad tell our story to some reporters? Marcus thought for a moment, then nodded solemnly. If it'll help make sure other kids don't get scared like we did, then I want to help. Jasmine stepped forward, her chin raised defiantly. I want to speak at the press conference, Dad. People need to hear from us kids too, not just the adults. Thomas felt a surge of pride at his children's courage. All right then, we'll do this as a family. As the Carters prepared for the press conference, across town at police headquarters, Captain Richards was facing a storm of his own. The Internal Affairs Department had descended en masse, demanding answers about how such a colossal mistake could have occurred. In a conference room that felt more like an interrogation chamber, Richards faced a panel of stern-faced investigators. Captain, the lead investigator, a no-nonsense woman named Angela Hawkins, began, walk us through the chain of events that led to this morning's raid on the Carter residence. Richards took a deep breath, his mind racing back through the events of the past few days. It started with an anonymous tip to our drug task force. The informant claimed that a high-level dealer known only as Ghost was operating out of a suburban home in the Oakwood neighborhood. He paused, the absurdity of the situation hitting him anew. In retrospect, we should have been more skeptical. The idea of a major drug operation in that neighborhood, it just doesn't add up. Hawkins leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. And yet, you authorized a full SWAT raid based on this questionable intelligence. Why? Richards felt a bead of sweat trickle down his back. The informant provided details that seemed to corroborate their story. They described the layout of the house, mentioned specific times when supposed drug transactions took place. It all seemed very credible at the time. Another investigator, a younger man with a buzz cut, chimed in. But you didn't bother to verify the homeowner's identity? A simple property records check would have revealed that the house belonged to one of your own officers. Richards winced at the accusation. You're right. That's a critical step that was overlooked. I take full responsibility for that oversight. Hawkins' voice cut through the tension in the room. Captain Richards, this incident has exposed serious flaws in our intelligence gathering and verification processes. It's clear that significant changes need to be made. Richards nodded, his face grim. I couldn't agree more, Agent Hawkins. And I assure you, Thomas Carter is the right man to lead those changes. As the internal affairs investigation continued at headquarters, the Carter family arrived at the police department's press room. The space was already buzzing with activity, reporters setting up cameras and checking microphones. Sandra Reeves met them at the entrance, her professional demeanor barely masking her concern. Thomas, are you sure about this? Having your whole family up there. It's unprecedented. Thomas placed a reassuring hand on Sandra's shoulder. I'm sure, Sandra. The public needs to see the real impact of what happened today. My family's presence will drive that point home more effectively than any prepared statement. Sandra nodded, though her brow remained furrowed. All right, we got about 5 minutes before we go live. Is there anything you need? Thomas looked at his family, seeing the mix of nervousness and determination on their faces. We're ready, he said simply. As they took their places behind the podium, Thomas could feel the weight of dozens of camera lenses focused on them. He took a deep breath, reminding himself of the importance of what they were about to do. The room fell silent as Thomas stepped up to the microphone. Camera flashes erupted, capturing the image of the Carter family standing united in the face of adversity. Good afternoon, Thomas began, his voice steady and clear. My name is Thomas Carter. As many of you know, I am set to become the new commander of this city's SWAT team. What you may not know is that this morning, my family and I were the victims of a misguided SWAT raid on our home. A murmur rippled through the assembled reporters, pens scribbling furiously in notepads. I stand before you today, not just as a police officer, but as a husband and father whose family has been traumatized by a grave error in judgment and procedure. What happened to us this morning should never happen to any family, regardless of their background or position. Thomas paused, letting his words sink in. But we are not here to cast blame or seek retribution. We are here to ensure that this incident becomes a catalyst for meaningful change in how our police department operates. He gestured to his family. I'd like to give my wife and children the opportunity to share their experiences with you. It's important that you hear from them, to understand the human cost of our mistakes. Lisa stepped forward, her voice trembling slightly as she recounted the terror of the morning's events. Marcus, his small hand clutched tightly in his mother's, spoke of his fear that the bad guys would come back. When it was Jasmine's turn to speak, she stepped up to the microphone with a determination that belied her years. What happened to us today was wrong, she said, her voice clear and unwavering. But what's even more wrong is that it happens to other families who don't have the platform we do to speak out. It needs to stop. As Jasmine stepped back, Thomas returned to the microphone. My daughter is right. This isn't just about what happened to us. It's about creating a system where such mistakes are prevented before they can occur. He outlined a series of immediate actions that would be taken, including a complete overhaul of intelligence verification procedures, mandatory de-escalation training for all SWAT team members, and the establishment of a civilian oversight committee to review all proposed raids before they could be executed. These changes won't be easy, Thomas concluded. They will require a fundamental shift in how we approach our duties as law enforcement officers. But they are necessary if we are to truly live up to our oath to protect and serve our community. As Thomas finished speaking, the room erupted with questions from the assembled reporters. Sandra stepped forward, preparing to moderate the Q&A session, but Thomas held up a hand to quiet the room. "Before we take questions," he said, his voice cutting through the clamor, "I want to make one thing clear. The officers involved in this morning's raid were following orders based on faulty intelligence. While there will be consequences for the breakdown in procedure, I want to emphasize that the real issue here is systemic. It's these systems that we must change, not just punish individual officers." A hush fell over the room as the reporters digested this statement. Then slowly hands began to raise. "Yes, you in the front," Thomas said, pointing to a young reporter in the first row. "Mr. Carter," the reporter began, "given what happened to your family this morning, how can you stand there and defend the officers involved?" Thomas leaned into the microphone, his gaze steady. "I'm not defending their actions. What I'm doing is acknowledging the reality of the situation. These officers are part of a system that failed today, a system that I am now responsible for improving. Vilifying them doesn't solve the underlying issues. What we need is accountability coupled with systemic change." Another reporter stood up. "Commander Carter, you mentioned a civilian oversight committee. Can you elaborate on how that would work?" Thomas nodded. "The details are still being worked out, but the basic idea is to have a diverse group of community members review proposed raids and other high-risk operations before they're greenlit. This committee would have the power to question intelligence sources, demand additional verification, and even veto operations they deem unnecessary or too risky." A murmur of surprise rippled through the room. Such a committee would be unprecedented in the department's history. A veteran reporter in the back raised her hand. "Commander, some might argue that involving civilians in police operations could compromise sensitive investigations or even put operations at risk. How do you respond to those concerns?" Thomas had anticipated this question. "I understand those concerns, but I believe the benefits far outweigh the risks. This committee wouldn't have access to ongoing investigations or confidential informants. Their role would be to review the justification for high-risk operations and ensure that all proper procedures have been followed. If anything, I believe this additional layer of oversight will make our operations more effective and less prone to the kind of error we saw today." As the questions continued, Lisa watched her husband with a mixture of pride and concern. She could see the toll this was taking on him, the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. But she could also see his determination, his unwavering commitment to turning this terrible experience into something positive. Jasmine tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mom," she whispered, "do you think this will really change things?" Lisa looked down at her daughter, seeing the hope and skepticism warring in her eyes. "I don't know, sweetie," she answered honestly. "But if anyone can make it happen, it's your father." As the press conference wound down, Thomas fielded one last question. "Commander Carter, given everything that's happened, are you still planning to take on the role of SWAT commander?" Thomas paused, his gaze sweeping across the room before settling on his family. In that moment, he saw the strength in Lisa's eyes, the determination in Jasmine's set jaw, the trust in Marcus's innocent face. He turned back to the reporter, his decision crystallizing. "Yes," he said firmly. "In fact, I'm more committed to this role now than ever before. What happened to my family this morning has given me a unique perspective, one that I believe is crucial for reshaping how our SWAT team operates. I've experienced firsthand the trauma that can result from overzealous and underverified operations. That experience will inform every decision I make in this role." He paused, his voice growing stronger. "But more than that, I see this as an opportunity to bridge the gap between law enforcement and the community we serve. An opportunity to set a new standard for accountability and transparency in policing. And an opportunity to ensure that what happened to my family never happens to another innocent family in this city." As Thomas stepped back from the podium, the room erupted in a flurry of camera flashes and shouted questions. Sandra quickly stepped in, announcing the end of the press conference and ushering the Carter family off the stage. In a quiet room adjacent to the press area, The family gathered, the adrenaline of the past few hours finally wearing off. Lisa wrapped her arms around Thomas, burying her face in his chest. "You were amazing out there," she murmured. Thomas held her tight, feeling the tension of the day begin to ebb away. "We all were," he replied, looking at Jasmine and Marcus with pride. "I couldn't have done this without you." Jasmine stepped forward, her eyes shining with a mixture of pride and determination. "Dad, what happens now? How do we make sure all those promises become real?" Thomas knelt down to meet his daughter's gaze. "That's an excellent question, Jazz. And it's not going to be easy. Change never is. But we're going to take it one step at a time, and we're going to do it together." Just then, there was a knock at the door. Sandra poked her head in. "Thomas, Captain Richards is here. He'd like a word." Thomas nodded, squeezing Lisa's hand reassuringly before stepping out to meet his superior officer. Richards looked haggard, the events of the day clearly weighing heavily on him. "Thomas, I don't even know where to begin. What happened today? It's inexcusable." Thomas held up a hand. "John, we both know there's plenty of blame to go around. But right now, I'm more interested in solutions. Are you ready to make some real changes?" Richards nodded solemnly. "Whatever it takes, Thomas. You have my full support." Over the next few weeks, the Carter family slowly began to heal from their ordeal. The physical damage to their home was repaired, but the emotional scars took longer to fade. Marcus still had nightmares occasionally, and Jasmine threw herself into researching police reform with a passion that both impressed and concerned her parents. Meanwhile, Thomas worked tirelessly to implement the changes he had promised. The Civilian Oversight Committee was established, much to the initial chagrin of some of his fellow officers. But as the new system began to take shape, even the skeptics had to admit that it was leading to more thoughtful, well-planned operations. The department's intelligence gathering and verification processes were overhauled, with multiple layers of checks and balances put in place to prevent another incident like the one that had affected the Carters. Thomas also instituted mandatory community engagement programs for all SWAT team members, ensuring that they spent time getting to know the neighborhoods they were tasked with protecting. 3 months after the raid, Thomas stood before his SWAT team, ready to lead them on their first operation under the new protocols. The target was a suspected arms dealer, and the intelligence had been meticulously gathered and verified over several weeks. As he briefed his team, Thomas could see the change in their eyes. There was a new level of awareness, a deeper understanding of the weight of their responsibilities. "Remember," Thomas concluded, "our job isn't just to enforce the law. It's to protect and serve our community. Every action we take today must reflect that commitment." The operation was a success. The suspect was apprehended without incident, and no innocent bystanders were harmed or traumatized. As Thomas debriefed his team, he felt a sense of pride in how far they had come. That evening, as the Carter family sat down to dinner, there was a lightness in the air that had been missing for months. "So, Dad," Jasmine began, a mischievous glint in her eye, "when do I get to join the Civilian Oversight Committee?" Thomas chuckled. "Let's get you through high school first, shall we?" Lisa reached across the table, squeezing her husband's hand. "I'm proud of you, Thomas. You took something terrible and turned it into real, positive change." Marcus piped up, his mouth full of mashed potatoes. "Dad's a superhero." As laughter filled the room, Thomas looked around at his family. The memory of that terrible morning would always be with them, but it no longer held the power to frighten or anger them. Instead, it had become a catalyst for growth, for change, for a better future. "You know," Thomas said, his voice soft but firm, "what happened to us was just one incident. There's still so much work to be done, so many systemic issues to address in law enforcement across the country." Jasmine nodded seriously. "But we've made a start, right? We've shown that change is possible." "That's right," Thomas agreed. "And we're not going to stop here. This is just the beginning." As the conversation continued, touching on Jasmine's latest school project and Marcus's upcoming soccer game, Thomas felt a deep sense of gratitude. The path ahead would not be easy, but with his family by his side and his commitment to justice as his guide, he knew they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. The story of the Carter family and their traumatic experience had become more than just a cautionary tale. It had become a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of resilience, and a roadmap for meaningful change in police practices across the nation. In the years that followed, Thomas Carter became known not just as a SWAT commander, but as a reformer, a bridge builder between law enforcement and the communities they served. The changes he implemented in his department became a model for police forces across the country. Jasmine, inspired by her family's experience, went on to study law with a focus on civil rights and police reform. Marcus, though still young, showed a growing interest in community organizing and social justice. And Lisa, ever the family's rock, continued to support her husband and children in their endeavors, while also becoming an advocate for families affected by police misconduct. The raid on their home, once a source of trauma and anger, had transformed into the catalyst for a movement. The Carters had turned their pain into purpose, their fear into force for change, and in doing so, had begun to reshape the very nature of policing in their community and beyond. As Thomas tucked Marcus into bed that night, his son looked up at him with sleepy eyes. "Dad," he murmured, "I'm not scared anymore. Not of the police, not of anything." Thomas felt a lump form in his throat. "That's good, buddy. That's exactly how it should be." He switched off the light and quietly left the room, pausing in the hallway to collect himself. From downstairs, he could hear Lisa and Jasmine's voices, discussing plans for a community outreach event they were organizing. Thomas Carter smiled to himself. They had come so far from that terrifying morning, and yet, in many ways, their journey was just beginning. But whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew that together, they could face anything. And with that thought, he headed downstairs to join his family, ready to continue their work of turning a single act of injustice into a legacy of positive change. Thomas Carter's decision to stand up for his family and use his experience to guide the SWAT team didn't just prevent a terrible mistake. It laid the foundation for real change within the police force. His unwavering resolve and leadership turned a moment of chaos into an opportunity for growth, transforming the way his team would approach their duty to serve and protect. It's a powerful reminder that standing up for what's right and leading with empathy can reshape minds and create a lasting impact. What would you have done if you were in Thomas's position? Let us know in the comments below. And if this story inspired you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss more thought-provoking and emotional journeys like this one.